All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming. My name is Sean Beck and I'm with North Branch Nature Center. And welcome to our 2024 series of Naturalist Journeys. It's a pleasure to have you all here. It's a pleasure to have Ben kicking off our series here on a snowy Vermont day. I want to say a couple of quick thank yous and housekeeping and that sort of thing before we turn things over to Ben. First, I want to say a big thanks to all of our sponsors that make Naturalist Journeys possible. So thanks especially to Hunger Mountain Co-op and 802 Coffee as our lead sponsors, as well as all of the sponsors that make Naturalist Journeys possible. We have the recording going tonight, so if for whatever reason your connection drops or anything like that, you can't hear Ben, you can't hear me, you can always feel free to check out the recording of this on our website, which will be up in the next couple of days at northbranchnaturecenter.org/presentations. That's where you can find all of the presentations that we've done at North Branch Nature Center for the last many years, as well as all the upcoming programs as well. So speaking of upcoming programs, this Naturalist Journey series is a little bit of a different tack than some of our previous seasons. This one is, we're really taking a look at climate change this season and looking at it through lenses that most other folks may not think of in terms of kind of entry points into climate change and climate resilience. So tonight we're going to be talking all about beavers. Next week, Kimberly Hagen's going to be joining us to talk about climate conscious sheep grazing and wool harvesting. We'll have musical performances. We'll have presentations on First Nations relationships with the land up in northern Quebec. Programs around self-care and mindfulness and meditation in nature. It's a really great lineup this year, so head over to our website to check out the rest of them. Some of them are in person, some of them are online like this one, but all between now and March, we have a great lineup coming up. We have a Q&A and a chat bar that you can use to ask questions of Ben as we go. We'll hold all the questions until the end of the talk tonight, and then we'll kind of moderate those at the end, but feel free to use the Q&A to post any questions that you have as we go. And with that, I'm really excited to be able to welcome Ben. Ben is a really accomplished author. His most recent book that just hit the shelves back in September was, what's the name of it? Oh my gosh, I had it right here. Oh, Crossings, of course. Crossings is actually about roadkill and wildlife crossings and wildlife corridors, which is an excellent read. You should definitely check it out as soon as you're done reading Eager, his book all about beavers that tonight's talk is inspired by. So Ben has published articles in all of the newspapers, all of the great magazines and journals and things like that. So without getting too much into his accolades, suffice it to say that we're really excited to have Ben here tonight and to learn a bit about our favorite aquatic rodent. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Ben. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks, Sean. And wow, favorite aquatic rodent more than muskrats. Are you sure?
Well, I guess you'll have to convince us.
They're both pretty cool. Fantastic. Well, thank you, Sean, for that introduction and for having me. Thanks to you all for being here. I'm really looking forward to this presentation, especially because Vermont was one of the places that I went working on this book, Eager, and it certainly features prominently in the book, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. So tonight I'll be talking about sort of partnering with beavers, working with these animals to achieve various ecological goals and ends and sort of reap their benefits. But before we talk about how to work with beavers, I think it's important to establish a few basic facts about what beavers are and how they make their living. And I'm sure you guys are all Vermonters. You live in a state full of wetlands. You're pretty beaver savvy people. So you're probably aware, as Sean said, that beavers, of course, are rodents. They're North America's largest rodent, the second largest rodent in the world, behind only the capybara. Typical adult beaver is 40 to 60 pounds, so they're quite a bit bigger than most people realize. And as I'm sure you know, they're semi-aquatic rodents, right? So they spend their whole lives in and around water, and they've got a number of wonderful features and adaptations for this unique semi-aquatic niche they fill. They've got incredibly dense fur. So they've got one of the thickest pelts in the animal kingdom to keep out the water. And of course, that was their undoing, and we'll talk about that in a minute. They've got these wonderful webbed duck-like hind feet, so they're really powerful, agile swimmers. They can hold their breath for up to 15 minutes, so they're, really fabulous in the water. They've got a second set of eyelids called nictitating membranes, transparent eyelids that function as goggles underwater, as well as a second set of lips, these fur-lined lips that act as a valve. So they can close the lips behind their front teeth and chew and drag branches underwater without drowning. I think that's kind of the coolest beaver feature. And then what's the beaver's most recognizable feature? What makes a beaver obviously a beaver? Of course, it's the tail, right? And the tail has all kinds of different functions. It's an alarm system, so I'm sure you've all heard the smack of a tail slap hitting the water. They do that to warn other beavers about the presence of predators. It's a rudder while they swim. It's a kickstand out on land, and it's a fat storage device. They actually put on fat for the winter in their tail. So the tail is a super cool kind of multi-purpose, Swiss Army knife. The other really cool beaver feature is their teeth. Beavers' teeth are self-filing, self-sharpening. The top and bottom incisors kind of grind together like chisels and create this nice point. And beavers, their teeth are orange, as you can see. And the reason for that is that they're actually chemically and structurally fortified with iron. That beavers derive from their food. So beavers have these wonderful iron teeth, and that's really helpful, of course, when you spend your whole life chewing and cutting down trees, right? So beavers eat cambium, that's the inner bark of trees. That's kind of the sugary layer that does the growing. They don't eat that heartwood. Beavers' preferred trees, anything in the poplar family, typically. They really like aspen and birch, cottonwood, willow, another favorite, but they'll take just about any deciduous tree. They do tend to avoid conifers. And they eat lots of green herbaceous vegetation as well, cattails, water lilies, wildflowers. I've seen them basically mow people's lawns for them. So they'll eat just about anything. They are totally herbivorous, though. They don't eat any fish at all. That's otters. So, of course, in addition to cutting down trees to eat the cambium, they also use the wood as construction material, right? And there are, two basic types of beaver structure. The first is the lodge. That's the kind of the fundamental beaver housing unit. There are typically underwater tunnels that lead up into the lodge. And then inside the lodge, you've got kind of an elevated nesting chamber that beavers line with wood chips. They're very clean, fastidious animals. And in the lodge, you've got typically 2 to as many as 8 or so beavers. And that's the male and the female, the mating pair who generally mate for life, the baby beavers who are born in the spring called the kits, the 1-year-olds and the 2-year-olds. So you've got 3-year classes of brothers and sisters all hanging out in the lodge together, sort of teaching each other how to be beavers. And then those 2-year-olds will head off looking for their own territory, like they're going to beaver college or something. And, often the lodges you see are these freestanding island lodges out in the middle of lakes or ponds. I think more typical are those bank lodges, those bank attached lodges, like you see there. And then often, they'll basically tunnel into banks and then kind of, put a bunch of sticks on top of the burrow as essentially a ventilation chamber. Those are sort of less conspicuous forms of lodges. So just because you don't see one of those big, island lodges out in the middle of the pond doesn't mean the beavers aren't there, burrowed into the banks, living relatively inconspicuous lifestyles. And that's my dog, whose name is Kit, as in a baby beaver. So along with the lodge, the other beaver structure, right, is the dam. Why do beavers build dams? What is the point of this unique, specialized behavior that nothing else in the animal kingdom really does? Well, a beaver out on land is a fat, slow, smelly package of meat, right? And they get eaten by black bears and wolves and cougars and coyotes and all kinds of other carnivores. Cougars love beavers. So, a beaver out on land is very, very exposed to predation. But by building that dam and creating that nice deep pool of water, they're basically engineering their own shelter, right? Instead of having to walk overland to that good-looking aspen tree and, risk getting eaten by a cougar along the way, they can swim to it instead, cut it down, float it back to the lodge, all without leaving the water, right? So they're building those dams to create their own habitat. I think it's worth noting, right, that beavers live very happily in large bodies of water, like big main stem rivers and lakes, without having to build dams at all, right? There's plenty of water depth for them there already. You know, they're only really building these dams up on those kind of higher order tributaries, you know, up near the kind of the top of the watershed, where they need that dam to create sufficient water depth to be safe from predators. So again, you know, there are, you know, 1 million beavers living in, let's say, the Connecticut River very happily, without having to build dams, because there's already plenty of water for them. But, you know, where they are building dams, a typical colony is building, you know, one big primary dam. They come in all kinds of different shapes and sizes. I just love this one for its, you know, beautiful radial arc, that really nice, you know, 90-degree symmetry there. And you can see they actually incorporate a lot of rocks in their dams as well. It's not just wood. So they're often building, you know, one primary dam, a number of smaller secondary dams. You know, often you see these kinds of terraces, essentially, that act like kind of a, you know, a lock and canal system, just, you know, smoothing out the slope of those, you know, steeper mountain streams. And you know, these dams, when the beavers are left to their own devices, can get pretty enormous. Here's you know, my favorite dam in northern Minnesota that's probably 600 feet long and maybe 15 feet high or so, and is obviously the work of many generations of beavers, all adding their stick to the pile. So this kind of, you know, monolith isn't necessarily typical, but that's the kind of thing that beavers are capable of. And, you know, some of those larger dams can impound enormous volumes of water, right? I'm always very impressed by their kind of hydrological savvy. You know, I feel like if you took an engineer from the Army Corps and said, okay, build a dam that, you know, minimizes labor and maximizes the total volume of water stored, you know, they would put the dam exactly where the beavers tend to. So this is, you know, one really impressive 300-acre or so beaver pond created by a single strategically placed beaver dam at the outflow of this narrow little canyon, right? So they're pretty sharp little critters. And the other cool thing that beavers do that, you know, we don't talk enough about, I think, is that they're also amazing diggers. They excavate these elaborate canal networks that lead up into the forest. And again, the reason for that is just, you know, food and shelter, right? They can swim up those canals, cut down a tree, float it back to the main pond, all without leaving the water, and you know, and thus avoiding exposing themselves to predators. And that's another really important way that beavers kind of spread water out, you know, over the landscape, is by digging those canals. So beavers, and, you know, doing all of this stuff, building, you know, building dams and creating ponds and wetlands and, you know, digging canals, right? They're doing all of this stuff to just maximize their own habitat and their access to food and shelter. But, you know, in the process, they're also creating habitat for lots of other creatures as well. You know, beavers are what's known as keystone species, animals that support, you know, an entire ecosystem, because, of course, we know that wetlands mean life, right? And beavers, by building and maintaining ponds and wetlands, create habitat for lots of other creatures too. And it's, you know, it's really almost impossible to name a species that doesn't benefit from beavers at some point. But, you know, certainly waterfowl and wading birds are really happy in and around beaver ponds. Here's a great blue heron rookery in a beaver pond in Wisconsin. We know that other semi-aquatic mammals like muskrats and otters and mink and moose are all very closely associated with beaver ponds. We know that amphibians love beaver ponds. I live in Colorado. This is the boreal toad, which is almost a beaver pond obligate, you know, a species that essentially only breeds in and around beaver ponds. And, you know, in Vermont, you've got spotted salamanders and marbled salamanders and wood frogs and peepers, you know, all of these different amphibians that very happily breed in and around beaver wetlands. This is the St. Francis satyr, perhaps the rarest butterfly in the country. And, you know, part of the reason they're so rare is that their caterpillars only eat sedges that grow in beaver wetlands. This certain type of sedge that's you know, sort of dependent upon beaver. So here's a species that's basically, again, you know, obliged to live with beavers. And then, you know, there's some kind of weirder, cooler connections as well. You know, it's hard to go to a beaver pond and not observe something interesting. Here's just one of my favorite little anecdotes. This is from a beaver complex in Minnesota. And here you can see, here's the old beaver dam, that line in the distance there. And, at some point the beavers left this area, the dam broke down, the pond drained, you get this lush, wet meadow left behind that's really good forage for, deer and moose and other species. But in this case, this giant beaver lodge was left high and dry after that pond drained, and a pack of wolves actually moved into that lodge and raised their pups in the lodge. So that's beavers, creating habitat for their direct predator. I think that's pretty incredible. And here's just one other neat anecdote. A couple of years ago, I was in Utah checking out some beaver dams and ponds, and a friend and I saw a sandhill crane walking atop a beaver dam. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. I've never seen a sandhill in a beaver pond before. So I took that picture, and then later I looked more closely and looked at the crane's feet and saw that she'd actually built a nest and laid a little clutch of eggs atop that dam, which is pretty incredible. So again, you wouldn't see a peer-reviewed paper about this necessarily, but anecdotally, you go to these ponds and it's just astonishing, how much life you see. And then another really important beaver connection are fish, right? If you're a juvenile trout or salmon, you don't want to live in the fast flowing main stem river. You want to live in a meander or an eddy or a pool. You want that kind of complex slow water refuge habitat where you can just take it easy and eat insects and conserve your energy and take cover from herons and kingfishers. And so beavers create that that really good refuge habitat. And there are a million papers showing that beaver ponds improve trout and salmon production. Of course, one objection you sometimes hear from fish biologists and anglers is, wait a second, we're trying to take we're trying to take dams out of rivers right now, right? We're trying to reduce obstacles to fish migration. Why would we want to put more dams into rivers? But, obviously, a beaver dam is nothing like a giant, human-built concrete dam. And, fish have no problem jumping over beaver dams or swimming around them or even wriggling through the woody structure. And, here's another kind of cool anecdote. This is a beaver pond that I visited outside of Seattle. Here's the dam in the top right corner of the screen. Here's the pond. And here are the two freshly excavated coho salmon nests. So at least two fish had no problem whatsoever getting past this beaver dam. And in fact, the connection between beavers and fish is so deep. It goes back so many millions of years that it inspired my favorite bumper sticker, which is "Beavers taught salmon to jump." I think that gets at the connection pretty nicely. So, one important question to ask, right, is how many beavers do we have in North America these days? How are these animals doing? And, they're doing okay. We've got something like 10 to 15 million beavers. So they're not an endangered species, right? They're not going to go extinct anytime soon. But then you start to wonder, wait a second, how many beavers did we have? How many beavers were here prior to European arrival? And we don't really know the answer, but the best guess is that there were as many as 400 million beavers at one point on this continent, which would have built, perhaps 200 or so million beaver ponds. Which, a little bit of back of the envelope math tells you that maybe they had something like 230,000 square miles of land underwater, which is, for reference, the size of Arizona and Nevada put together, right? So the influence of this animal was historically vast. And, I think it's important to emphasize that, look, this idea that beavers are keystone species and ecosystem engineers, this is something that native people on this continent knew for many thousands of years. And, in fact, tribes like the Blackfeet had cultural prohibitions against killing beavers because they recognized that, especially in the arid American West, these animals create these ecological oases that, become watering holes for elk and deer and bison and other species, right? So, again, this idea that beavers are really sort of important fulcrums within ecosystems is, certainly not new to Western science. So one of the things that I did when I was working on Eager was just, go back through the historical record, old trappers' journals and railroad survey reports and explorers' diaries, just trying to figure out what a fully beavered continent looked like and how it functioned. What did this what did North America look and feel like when there were, something like 400 million beavers on it? And, there are just all kinds of incredible accounts of, the abundance of this animal. Some of my favorite come from the journals of Lewis and Clark, who describe seeing beaver dams in every single tributary of the Missouri River, as far as the eye could see, up into the mountains, right? This animal was truly everywhere. And in some places, in fact, the Corps of Discovery couldn't even use those valley bottoms. They had to walk along the ridge lines because beavers had so thoroughly ponded everything up. So that was in 1805 that Lewis and Clark saw, beaver dams as far as the eye could see in every tributary. In 1843, just 38 years later, John James Audubon, of course, the famous naturalist and painter, traveled the exact same route up the Missouri River, and he was looking for beavers to paint. He was kind of off of birds at that point. He was on this mammal kick. He was trying to find a beaver to paint a beaver, and he couldn't find a single beaver in the entire Missouri River, where Lewis and Clark had found them ubiquitous just 38 years earlier. So where did all those beavers go? What did they turn into? Well, of course, they turned into hats, right? The fur trade, the industrial fur trade, really begins in New England in the early 1600s. And spreads very rapidly west and south across the continent. White fur trappers and traders are just, extracting beaver from every single river, lake, stream, and pond they encounter to turn into hats. And I think we hear the phrase beaver hat and think of this like big fluffy kind of Davy Crockett type of thing. But in fact, beaver hats were these elegant sort of Victorian top hats that were, all the rage in European high society. Beaver fur makes really good hat material because beavers have two layers of fur, and it's those under hairs that kind of lock together like Velcro when you felt it and make this really, durable, malleable hat making material. So, beaver pelts along with timber and cod were really the most important economic resource that that trappers and traders found in North America. And there have been voluminous books written about the fur trade, and I'll just I just kind of briefly touch upon some of this history in my own book. But I think it's almost impossible to overstate what a huge driver of American history the fur trade was. Practically every historical event prior to the Civil War had some kind of beaver connection. It was, the American Revolution, one of the British offenses that angered the colonists was denying them access to trapping grounds west of the Appalachian Mountains. The Louisiana Purchase, that was partly fueled by Jefferson's desire to secure new places to trap. The War of 1812, et cetera. And of course, it was, beaver trappers and traders who spread smallpox and other diseases that, really ravaged many native tribes. This is just, one powerful testament, I think, to how significant a historical event the fur trade was, is that this is a coin minted by the Oregon Territory. And at one time, the Oregon Territory was basically the entirety of the Northwest, from Washington to Wyoming. And this beaver coin that was minted by the Oregon Territory was basically fixed to the value of one beaver pelt. So just as people advocate, going to the gold standard today, the entire economy of a quarter of the country operated under the pelt standard for a number of years, which I think is just, again, a kind of an incredible testament to how significant an event this was. So in addition to being a hugely significant historical event, the fur trade was also a profoundly important ecological, even geological event, right? What happens when you kill several hundred million beavers? Well, several hundred million beaver dams break down, and those ponds drain. And I think again, just another amazing testament. It's a phrase I keep using, but there are a lot of amazing testaments out there. One amazing testament of the sort of the significance of the fur trade is that in the Long Island Sound, so many nutrients flowed out of those beaver ponds into the Long Island Sound that it fertilized this bloom of diatoms, of phytoplankton, which then settled out. So today, if you take a sediment core in the Long Island Sound, it'll be this layer of diatoms that was laid down in the 1600s, thanks to all of these busted beaver ponds. I just think that's just incredible to contemplate, that the signature of the fur trade is, written in the floor of the Atlantic Ocean. But of course, the loss of all of these beaver ponds was an ecological disaster. We don't really think about the fur trade in the same terms as we think about the deforestation of New England, or the busting of the sod in the Midwest, or gold mining in the Sierra Nevadas. We don't think about the fur trade as being a kind of a seminal ecological catastrophe, but in some ways it was really the original sin of European colonists, and the kind of the degradation of aquatic ecosystems that followed the fur trade was just immense. Here's a really striking example. So when you've got a beaver-rich stream, all of those beaver dams are acting like little speed bumps, right? They're slowing the water down and spreading the water out onto the floodplain. And when you lose all of those beaver-built speed bumps, there's nothing checking the velocity of water, and you often get this kind of catastrophic erosion and incision. And you can see that here, right? This is a stream that used to be up on the floodplain and just cut through its banks in the absence of beaver dams, and is now trapped within its banks, and it can't spill onto the floodplain anymore to create those ponds and wetlands that we know are so important, right? So again, I think we often look at these kinds of degraded streams, and there are hundreds of thousands of miles of streams like this all over the country. We look at this sort of thing and say, oh, that's because of overgrazing or mining or logging or some other impact. But in many cases, it was the loss of beavers that led to this kind of catastrophic erosion, and represented an enormous loss of habitat for moose and frogs and waterfowl and a million other organisms. So, by 1900 or so, the beaver population has really reached its nadir. Beavers are kind of functionally extinct in the lower 48. There are still, maybe 100,000 or so hanging on, pretty much all in Canada. But we've gone from, 400 million beavers to 100,000, let's say. So just a catastrophic free fall. But, around 1900, various states start to kind of wise up and say, hey, wait a second, as Enos Mills, a great naturalist here in Colorado, put it, live beavers are more valuable than dead ones. And states start to reintroduce these beavers. Interestingly, in Vermont, pretty much all of the beavers came from New York. The state of New York in 1906 had a big beaver reintroduction project in the Adirondacks. And pretty quickly, 20 beavers became 20,000 and spilled over into Vermont. So that's basically where, all of New England's beavers come from, is this New York reintroduction project in the early 1900s. Of course, probably the most famous beaver reintroduction took place in Idaho in the late 1940s. And, you guys might know this story. But in Idaho, they tried to, they wanted to sort of move beavers back into a wilderness area. First, they tried relocating them on horseback. The horses didn't love that, as you might imagine. So then, one of these biologists had the bright idea of airdropping them. It was, it's 1948. They've got all of these surplus airplanes and parachutes on hand from World War II. Sorry, this video is kind of choppy. Usually it's not like this. And so in 1948, they airdropped 76 beavers out of airplanes in these special crates attached to parachutes. 75 of the beavers survived. One beaver, unfortunately, escaped from the crate in midair and fell to his death. Very sad. But the next year, when they flew back over this area, they found new ponds and wetlands in all the places that they had dropped beavers. So, nobody's airdropping beavers today, but in 1948, this was how it was done. So, all throughout the 20th century, beaver populations are increasing, right? They've been protected from trapping in some cases. They're being reintroduced. Their populations are starting to grow. And they're recolonizing some of their former habitat. The problem is that in their absence, we've colonized that same habitat, right? It turns out that both humans and beavers like the same places. We like broad, fertile floodplains and low gradient stream corridors. That's where they build their dams and ponds. And that's also where we, put our roads and rail lines and power lines and infrastructure, right? And, I'd argue that, we're the nuisance species more than they are. But, there's no question that when beavers and humans collide, problems can ensue. Here's a set of railroad tracks that I visited in Massachusetts. These tracks had just sort of been rebuilt, this big multi-million-dollar project. Everybody's very excited. And within a few months, beavers had them totally underwater. Here's another illustration of beaver conflict. This is in New Mexico. And I just like this picture because what you can sort of see here, you can see how flooded this cabin is. So the beavers begin their dam in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. They dam up to the porch of the cabin. Then they incorporate the cabin in the dam, and they keep going on the right-hand side of the screen, right? So, you wouldn't want to be that landowner, but you have to admire the ingenuity there, right? Probably the most common cause of beaver conflicts is damming in road culverts, right? If you're a beaver, well, a roadbed is like the greatest dam in the world, and the culvert is the little leak in the dam. And beavers plug leaks. That's what they do. So the water level rises, the road washes out, big headache to maintain, etc. And so again, that's probably the most common cause of beaver conflict. And they do get into kind of weirder trouble as well. Here's a beaver that broke into a dollar store in Maryland and was browsing the plastic Christmas tree aisle when it was apprehended by the authorities, right? So again, they get into all kinds of creative mischief. So the way that we almost invariably handle these sorts of beaver conflicts is by lethally trapping, by killing the offending beaver. Right. Every year, the Department of Agriculture, the federal government kills, 20 to 25,000 beavers. Private nuisance trappers kill, certainly tens and probably hundreds of thousands more. We don't really know. And look, certainly killing beavers makes a kind of an intuitive sense, right? The beaver's causing a problem, get the beaver out of there. The issue is that when you kill the beavers, first, you're potentially eliminating all of that great, pond and wetland habitat that we care about. But also, all you're doing is creating a vacancy sign for the next family of beavers, right? As long as that culvert is still calling to them saying, hey, build a dam right here, they're going to keep doing that. They're going to keep coming back. So, there are all of these communities all over the country, including in Vermont, that are on these very expensive and I would argue inhumane cycles of trapping and recolonization and trapping and recolonization. So you start to wonder, well, maybe there's a kind of a better way of doing business. Maybe there's some way of living with these animals rather than kind of reflexively killing them. Oops. Yeah. So here's one. I guess just briefly, one of the kind of the ways that that these sorts of conflicts, beaver conflicts, have been handled is by live trapping and relocating the beavers. Right, again, beavers causing a problem. Let's catch the beaver, go put it somewhere where there aren't any beavers. And certainly that works in some cases, and it's a good strategy to have. It's a good tool in the toolbox, as they say. But I think the problem is that in many places, especially in some areas in Vermont, where there are lots of wetlands, you guys are close to carrying capacity, right? It's kind of hard to find really good habitat that doesn't have beavers in it already. And the problem is that beavers are very territorial animals, and you don't want to release beavers into an existing colony's territory. So I think that better than relocating them is sort of learning to live with them instead, right? Coexistence techniques that allow these animals to kind of stay put and do their thing in places where they can really help us. One reason that beavers are killed frequently is cutting down trees, right? Cutting down people's fruit trees or ornamental trees or what have you. And, I just don't ever think that a beaver should be killed for cutting down a tree. That's just, much too easy a problem to solve with a bit of, kind of heavy gauge wire fencing. So here's kind of a nice case study from my town in Colorado where a local land trust had these beautiful old cottonwood trees they wanted to protect. Okay, that's fine. You don't want beavers to cut down these nice trees. That's very understandable. So they fenced those cottonwoods, and then they left unfenced the non-native Siberian elm trees, which the beavers took down, right? So that's invasive vegetation management, using beavers as your agents. I think that's a pretty cool example of creative, non-lethal problem solving. Here's another neat illustration. One of the options for tree protection is painting trees with this kind of abrasive sand-based latex paint. Beavers don't like chewing through the sand. It's just bad for their teeth. So this community in Tennessee, I think, actually kind of creatively painted their trees all of these different colors, which looks pretty good, I think. They also, I will say that, in keeping with Southern tradition, they put hot sauce on the trees as well, which the beavers also didn't like, but the hot sauce washed off in the rain. So, skip the hot sauce, but that abrasive sand paint works super well. When beavers are causing flooding issues, that's a little bit more difficult to solve, but there too we've got options. This is a contraption known as the beaver deceiver, or at least one variation on a kind of a whole product line created by Skip Lyle, who lives in Vermont, and I bet there are people on this call who know and have worked with Skip. He's the inventor of, again, this long litany of products that basically protect culverts from beaver plugging and reduce flooding. And they all, they're sort of popularly called beaver deceivers, although they have lots of different names that Skip has creatively given them. But basically the idea is that you're putting a pipe through a beaver dam or into a culvert, basically keeping the water flowing, and then those fences, those little cages, are there to prevent beavers from plugging up the pipe, right? Because they will do that if they kind of figure it out. And again, the idea is just dropping the level of the water, right? Moving water from the upstream side to the downstream side, lowering that pond to a point where both beavers and humans can tolerate it, and you're not snorkeling through your driveway, right? So these and here's just a kind of a very low-tech, crappy version that a group that I was involved in Washington State installed a few years ago. And this, if Skip saw this, he would say this is an embarrassment. It's grossly under-engineered, but it sort of illustrates the principle, right? Which is that you're just dropping that pond to a level that both the beavers and the humans can tolerate. So in this instance, beavers were flooding a woman's property. She couldn't access most of her property, so we put this this crummy little pipe in, and within an hour we dropped the pond by 6 inches or so. You can kind of see that on those tree trunks there. And a few years later, the beavers are still there. The woman is very happy. The flooding has been reduced, but the pond still exists, and that's a good win-win, right, for both beavers and humans. So these sorts of contraptions are highly effective. There have been studies showing that they work 85 to 95% of the time. And I think Skip would tell you, as he told me, that look, beavers have brains the size of grapes, right? And these are animals that, yes, they're good at what they do, but we can outsmart them. We can beaver-proof our infrastructure and live with these critters and reap all of the benefits that they provide us. So what are those benefits? We've been talking about what beavers do for fish and moose and wading birds and so on, but what do they do for us humans that we might care about? Why go to all of the trouble of keeping beavers around? And a few really important beaver ecosystem services worth mentioning is, first, they're fantastic drought mitigators, right? They're storing huge volumes of water in their pond complexes. This is a mountain pass here in Colorado at about 12,000 feet up. This is the headwaters of the Roaring Fork River, which is a tributary to the Colorado. And you can see that, the stream is just this, little meandering sine wave. And then it hits all of these beaver ponds, or all of these beaver dams. And it just floods that valley, right? And in this picture, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of gallons of water being stored in this little valley, basically creating a little reservoir up in the headwaters, gradually releasing water deep into the summer and fall, and just keeping water in our rivers and streams and irrigation ditches, right? So they're fantastic water storage devices. And that's especially important as we lose our snowpack. We know that in the American West, as in New England, snowpack is a really important source of water. We want that gradual melt all throughout the spring and summer. And when we lose that snowpack, when the precipitation falls as rain instead, we don't have that gradual melt. So we need this animal to build again, thousands of little reservoirs up in the high country to keep water on the landscape and mitigate drought and help us adapt to climate change. On the other end of the spectrum, beavers are fantastic agents of flood attenuation, right? And you sort of think, well, wait a second, beavers cause flooding, right? Don't they? How do they prevent flooding? But you imagine a giant pulse of rainwater racing downstream, and then it hits all of those beaver dams and ponds and wetlands, and it spreads out laterally onto the floodplain, and it sinks into the ground, and it's stored in the ponds. And beavers are capturing all of this runoff for us, and there have been studies in England basically showing that beavers capture about 30% of these big rainfall events, or at least they're capable of that, which is pretty cool. And this is a beaver complex in Scotland, another really rainy place where beavers have been reintroduced precisely for their flood control benefits, which is really exciting. And I mean, here in the West where I live, right, drought is kind of our primary climate change issue, but in New England it's flooding, right? You've gotten these giant deluges, and beavers are capable of capturing and storing some of that runoff and protecting downstream communities. So I think that's kind of worth pausing to contemplate for a moment, right? We've got these two polar opposite problems: drought on one side of the country, flooding on the other side of the country, and beavers can help us mitigate both of them by stabilizing flows and that hydrograph, right? I think that's pretty magical to contemplate. Another wonderful thing that beavers do is they're great irrigators, right? They're spreading water out and they're storing huge amounts of water in the ground. I think that you look at a beaver pond and there's all of the visible surface water you see, but what you don't see is the water soaking into the aquifers, hydrating soils, raising that water table, and sub-irrigating plants. And this guy is James Rogers. He's a rancher I met in Nevada, who pointed out that beavers were increasing forage production for his livestock tenfold, which is pretty incredible. So, now in places like Nevada and Idaho and Utah, there are these clusters of pro-beaver farmers and ranchers who have really seen the benefits that these animals are capable of providing from an irrigation standpoint, which is pretty cool. Another fantastic beaver service is they capture pollution, right? Stream is racing along, it's carrying nitrates and phosphates from agriculture, maybe heavy metals from old mining, stormwater, all kinds of, crap. And that stream hits that beaver dam, it slows down, it loses its energy, and it drops all of those suspended solids, which are then captured in many subsequent layers of sediment. So there have been, again, lots of studies showing that beavers are amazing at removing, especially nitrates, from watersheds, and even protecting or preventing the dead zones that form in places like the Long Island Sound or the Chesapeake Bay, when all of those nitrates and phosphates end up in big bodies of water. So again, beavers they're kind of like kidneys, right? They're just filtering out all of the pollution from the blood vessels that are our streams. And then the last, great beaver service worth highlighting is that they're amazing firefighters, right? Water doesn't burn, and by spreading water out and by, keeping the landscape nice and lush, beavers are creating these amazing fire refuges and fire breaks. Here's just an incredible image from Idaho a few years back, where, a wildfire has burned all of the uplands to a crisp, and, the only green, wet, blue, lush place on the landscape remaining is that beaver-influenced valley bottom, right? So especially here in the West, that firefighting component is a huge reason that people are excited about beavers right now. So, given all of these wonderful beaver-created services, why aren't they more fully embraced? Why do we still kill so many of them? How come we're not trying to get back to 400 million beavers? And I think that a big part of it is that when we wiped out beavers, we internalized an inaccurate vision of what a healthy stream looks like. We all sort of think, I think, that a healthy stream is this free flowing, fast moving, single thread channel with a cobble bottom, the kind of thing you would go, catch a 6-inch brook trout in. When in reality, so many of our aquatic ecosystems looked like this instead, right? That, there was just water all over the place, and there, dead and dying trees everywhere, and the bottom is kind of mucky and it smells like decomposition, and this isn't a place that you would necessarily, see in an Orvis catalog or, or a Field and Stream magazine. But, these sorts of beaver created systems were, I think historically in many, many places, much more rule than exception. So if we're going to fully embrace this animal, we need to change our conception of what a healthy stream looks like, and kind of restore our historical imagination. So to sum it all up, we have this wonderful animal. It provides all of these fantastic ecosystem services. It does it for free. And best of all, it doesn't need permits. That's really nice too, right? So let's, get out of the way and let the rodent do the work, as the adage of the beaver believer puts it. I will just briefly mention, as Sean did at the start, I have another book out just this fall called Crossings: How Road Ecology is Shaping the Future of Our Planet, about, again, as Sean said, wildlife corridors, wildlife crossings. Certainly Vermont is becoming a leader in that field as well. I bet some of you guys have seen the amazing Moncton amphibian culverts, which definitely get a shout out in this book. So I'll just flag that for you guys. But here again, we're talking about beavers, of course, and I'm happy to take some questions. So with that, I'll say thank you all so much, and I'll turn it back over to you, Sean.
Super. Ben, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Folks are welcome to throw your questions into the Q&A if you have any. And while waiting for those to populate, I have all sorts of questions. In the
Great.
meantime. So I have some questions about biology, about ecology, about engineering. So in no particular order. One question I've been wondering, so just to get really specific about North Branch Nature Center, we have a population of beavers that have a series of, a wetland complex near the Nature Center property. And then there's, plenty of other beavers upstream and downstream. Wondering if, if you were to, drive upstream or downstream from any particular beaver colony, are you likely to be encountering the, the children and the grandchildren related beavers? Or I'm just wondering, like, how the relationships between beaver families relate to, distance up and down the watershed.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Something I've wondered about too. There haven't been a lot of great, beaver genetics studies done, so I don't really know. But I would say that certainly my assumption would be right, that those animals are, if not all related, a lot of them are related. And we do know that that these are obviously they're both very family oriented and very territorial, right? So we know that those kits, those juvenile beavers that disperse, or those at least those 2-year-olds, the subadults, they're looking for territories, and we know that their parents tend to be more tolerant of them setting up shop nearby. So I'd imagine that those animals are probably related. But at the same time, I mean, it's it can be hard, especially in a place like Vermont that does have a pretty good beaver population. It can be hard for those animals to find a vacant territory. And in some cases, those dispersing subadults have to go a really long way to find an available spot. So that 2-year-old period, that dispersal is really the most dangerous moment of a young beaver's life, because they don't have their pond and lodge. They're vulnerable to predation. They're often crossing roads and getting hit by cars, etc. So but your question's a really good one, and we don't totally know the answer, but I would assume that that territories that are, or colonies that are close together are probably in many cases related.
Yeah, thanks. Kind of an ecological question, at least in this area, when thinking about different types of natural communities and different kind of like landscape level conservation, some of the most uncommon types of natural communities, things like acid bogs and nutrient-rich fens, and and basically like peatlands of various types are really dependent on very specific and consistent watershed kind of features. Water has to be coming into that system in a very certain way, has to be leaving that system in a certain way. When beavers set up shop, they are completely changing the hydrology of a valley, an area that might have only been fed by rainwater and only have lost water from evaporation is suddenly impounded. And I'm wondering in your conversations with biologists, if anybody has really spoken with you about the challenge that ecologists have with beavers around protecting potentially really rare habitats, like a bog or like a rich fen or something like that, and how making room for beavers is great for flood control and irrigation, all these sorts of things, but could potentially be the cause of the elimination of some of these rare wetland types.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I mean certainly one that comes up here in Colorado as well around alpine fens, which likewise kind of a rare ecosystem that beavers do alter. I mean I guess look, I don't. There's not a great answer to that question. I mean, I think that one important thing to remember is that beavers are often cyclic, right? They show up in a place, they do their thing for a few years, then maybe that pond fills with sediment, or they get predated, or they die of disease, or what have you, and they move on, right? So just because beavers take over a bog and transition it to a different state doesn't mean that that's a permanent condition, and those beavers might come and go, and maybe that bog will kind of reemerge in its in its condition prior to to beaver occupancy. And I'd also say that that I think that a lot of those fens and bogs and other kind of non-beaver wetland types have gone through that cycle a gazillion times over the years, right? And that maybe it's only been a fen in our memory, but 1,000 years ago, beavers were present, and they're not they're still part of the natural hydrology, even if they they haven't been there within our sort of short-term human memories.
Yeah, I think that's a great point when it comes to our relationship with beavers. If we are working on timescales of a year or a decade or a couple of decades, really we need to be thinking on in terms of like centuries, right? Because what's best for a property that year may not be what's best over the course of centuries, and just thinking about how to manage change and complexity on long time scales, I think is so important. I want to turn to some of the great questions in the Q&A now. Naomi asks, what do you think this country's beaver carrying capacity is today? If we want to build towards climate resilience, flood control, irrigation, etc., how many beavers can we fit?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I mean, I think that so that there are tools that provide empirical answers. There's something called BRAT, the Beaver Restoration Assessment Tool, which is basically a GIS model that says, okay, based on stream gradient, vegetation type, other human infrastructure, other variables, here's how many beavers can live in a watershed, or at least like here's how much available beaver habitat there is. And so, it could be interesting to run that, that beaver restoration assessment tool, in the area around the nature center, and just say, okay, where is our habitat, and where might beavers be able to live, and potentially how many colonies could we support around here, and so so I guess before I give my hand waving answer, I'll say that there are tools that let you arrive at something an imprecise but general kind of ballpark figure. I think that we're probably at something like 10% of our historic beaver capacity in most places. And again, like we don't know what our beaver population was. We have that giant, we have that estimate of, let's say, 250 million beaver ponds and several hundred million beavers. But of course, that comes with enormous error bars in both directions. So we don't know what our populations were, but I've heard lots of biologists say that we're generally at something like 10% of our capacity. And that varies, of course, watershed to watershed and state to state. I think that, again, as I said earlier, like Vermont is much closer, I think, to to its current capacity than a state like Colorado is, where I live. We've got we've got much further to go, I think, in restoring a healthy beaver population. But again, of course, like the problem is, we're never going to get back to 400 million beavers, right? We've just developed too much of the floodplain. We can't really tolerate these animals, or we can, but we, sort of choose not to. And I think that's where those coexistence techniques, those beaver deceivers and tree fencing and other tools really come in. That's the best way to increase our populations. It's just to not kill them. They're so good at dispersing and creating their own habitat. They reproduce so readily. If we just don't kill these animals, their population curves tend to be exponential. So can we get back to 400 million beavers? Probably not. Can we get to, let's say, 50% of historic capacity? Yeah, I think that's oftentimes a realistic goal, is getting from 10 to 20% of beaver capacity to 50%. I think we could do that.
I think especially as folks are looking towards affordable and effective climate mitigation measures. Maybe it was in your High Country News article saying that they're basically free, environmental engineers that you put out in the landscape, and they do all this work perfectly for you. And so maybe, I think that it seems like a pretty low-hanging fruit in terms of being able to do some pretty remarkable environmental remediation and climate resilience work without, well, as you said, without permits.
Yeah.
I want to turn to Carrie's question. Carrie says, what an incredible talk. I'm curious, what are Ben's thoughts on post-assisted log structures / beaver dam analogs? These human-made structures inspired by beavers to help reconnect rivers to floodplains.
Yeah, but certainly there's a chapter in my book about beaver dam analogs, or BDAs, which are basically, as Carrie said, human-built beaver dams. Essentially, you pound some posts vertically in the stream bed, you weave some willow in there, and you basically create a beaver starter kit, right? You give them some structure to build off of. You capture some water, and you're basically you're sort of mimicking what beavers do. And look, there are a million amazing examples out there, especially in the West, of places where these beaver dam analogs have done a huge amount of good. And I'm certainly, it's you were talking, Sean, just now about the importance of sort of cheap stream restoration, and beaver dam analogs are exactly that, right? You don't need a giant excavator or a front loader to do stream restoration. You just need some posts. It's pretty cool. I think that to me, the best thing that beaver dam analogs do is they create the conditions for beavers themselves to thrive, right? They let beavers sort of reestablish an ecosystems. They give them they're kind of like beaver kickstarters. They give beavers some structure to build off of. They kind of direct and focus their activity, and oftentimes the beaver dam analogs themselves will just kind of like wash away after a few years. But the beavers at that point are so established in the ecosystem that the beaver dam analogs have kind of done their job. And that's it. I get concerned sometimes that lots of agencies and farmers and ranchers and other folks sort of I think that sometimes they want the beaver dam analogs without the beavers, right? The beavers themselves are kind of an annoying headache, and they're like, well, we can just put some beaver dam analogs in, do what beavers do, and not have to worry about restoring the animals themselves. And I think that's problematic, because again, the reason we want beavers is that they just do all of this work for free in perpetuity. And if you have to go back out there every single year to, rebuild your beaver dam analog, then your cheap stream restoration technique is no longer very cheap, right? And so the point of those BDAs, is to kind of catalyze beaver restoration. They're not the point in and of themselves. So, in general, I'm very pro beaver dam analog, but, I also see them, I think, misapplied in some ways too.
Cool, thanks. I think we'll circle back towards that, some extensions of that question in just a minute. But first, Most importantly, we should turn to Asa's question. When do beavers leave their parents?
Yeah, Asa. So beavers leave their parents when they're 2 years old, typically. So Asa, if you're 6 years old, you should have left your parents 4 years ago. You've stuck around for way too long, and you need to go find your own lodge. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. 2 years old is that's like 18 for a beaver. So you still have a long time to go, Asa. Naomi is stuck with you.
Maybe Asa's practicing his beaver lodge building.
Yeah, there you go.
What threats does climate change pose to beavers? And I think this is actually a great segue into Lydia and Charlie's question, which is high volume rain events are more common these days, as all of us in Montpelier and Vermont are well aware. Have you noticed that these more powerful storm events create population setbacks and lodge damage, as well as dam damage, and effects on their food and habitat?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I think that, look, beavers are, they are amazing agents of climate adaptation and resilience. They do mitigate some of these big, powerful storm events. They also mitigate drought, right? But they can't survive everything. And certainly there are cases here in Colorado where we have streams that have dried up altogether. And beavers can make do with a very small amount of water, but they can't make do with no water. And we've certainly lost some beaver colonies, because streams have gone completely dry. And by the same token, what Lydia and Charlie is talking about, it does happen. Certainly dams will blow out. Lodges will get swept away. Those food caches that beavers assemble, those will get blown away as well. And some of these colonies will kind of disappear after some of those big storm events. Is that a population setback? I think that's an interesting question, right? Like, are those, what happens to those beavers, when their dam and potentially lodge gets swept away? I mean, maybe some of them drown. I mean, certainly I've heard reports of that, of people finding drowned beavers after big floods. But I also imagine a lot of them just get swept downstream, survive, and then set about rebuilding when the flood recedes, right? So to what extent is those high volume rain events, to what extent is that actually impacting their populations? I have no idea. But certainly it can be the source of localized loss of beaver colonies.
Anecdotally here, there's a tributary into the North Branch that's nearby us that has maybe a mile and a half up from the confluence, a series of beaver ponds. And in the peak of the July floods, the tributary coming into the North Branch was of course really raging. But at a certain point, all of those beaver dams failed, and it caused really the spiking of that tributary, where all of that water from all 5 of those beaver ponds came down in one big deluge. And
Wow.
the two thoughts we have are, one, wow, it's amazing how much water those dams are holding back, because that would have been water that was contributing to that creek all along. But
Right.
two, second thought was, wow, these dams failing caused some catastrophic damage to the stream channel and to some houses near the confluence as well. And it made us think, is there a way, recognizing, the increase in rainfall, and recognizing that beavers are good engineers, but they really have their work cut out for them when it comes to, this significant increase in rainfall. Is there a place for the combination of, like, the combining forces of beavers and engineering, and doing, assessments of beaver dams to check their structural integrity, and maybe do some not BDAs, but do some additional engineering on top of those beaver dams to help stabilize them, and so that they persist in higher storm flows. I don't know. Have you heard of any such thing?
Yeah, get some steel I-beams in there or something like that. No, I mean, certainly the phenomenon you're describing of, like the occasional beaver dam breach that releases, a huge volume of water. I mean, that, I've definitely heard of that elsewhere. And But I haven't heard of anybody doing that kind of like strategic assessment and reinforcement potentially. It's an interesting idea. I mean, one thing that does happen sometimes is that people they'll deliberately notch a beaver dam, to kind of relieve some of the pressure on the dam and just drop the water volume a little bit. And I don't really love that idea, mostly because the beavers will pretty quickly fix that and render it. Either the beavers will fix it and your efforts will be pointless, or, they'll leave the area because they, conclude that their dam is under attack. And neither is really a desirable outcome. So, it's an interesting idea. Could you assess beaver dams to see, if they're at risk of failure? Yeah, I don't know, if you try that, let me know. I'd be curious. I haven't heard of that elsewhere, but it's an interesting idea.
Well, if anyone out there listening has heard of such a thing and or wants to pursue that idea with us, I'd be happy to hear from you.
Yeah, I mean, that could, just kind of spitballing me. I mean, that could be a place for, one of those flow devices, right? A pipe through a beaver dam, that again just keeps the water moving, reduces the pond height a little bit, maybe takes some of the pressure off of the dam, but still maintains sufficient water volume for the beavers to stick around. Maybe talk to Skip Lyle and see if he wants to try that.
Sure, right. And instead of the deceiver lowering the water level to where the landowner wants it, it keeps the water level exactly where the beavers want it. Basically, you're keeping the dam from overtopping, essentially. Right. Oh, I like this idea. Yeah. Similarly, at the nature center, our circumstances basically we're 2 miles down from a pretty significant flood control dam and reservoir, and there are several tributaries between that reservoir or between that dam and us, and so the water level tends to be pretty consistent and pretty controlled because there's a consistent and regulated amount coming out of that dam. But in storm events, all the tributaries between the dam and us really rage, and the level of the North Branch is really flashy there. And we're wondering if the beavers continually try to build new dams because the water level appears to be very low most of the time. And then in these flashy events, the water, overwhelms the dams and breaks them and sends them all downstream. And the water goes back down to that very low control dam regulated level, and then they start over again. So we're trying to think, is the best way to actually maintain vegetation. And every time they do this, they're removing they need new construction materials. And so they're cutting down, new willows and new cottonwoods, et cetera. And at a certain point, there's only so much riparian vegetation we have to contribute to the constant rebuilding of these dams. So we're trying to decide, should we try to remove the dams, or should we try to help stabilize those dams? Which is going to be the better outcome for for the long-term health of the riparian corridor?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, to me, it's I just always come back to sort of like the futility of dam removal, right? That, or at least the perpetuity of it. It's like, do you really want to assign yourselves that task forever? Maybe not. And look, and maybe that's a place for a beaver dam analog. You take some poles, pound them vertically into the stream bed, and create structure that is, maybe a little bit more stable than what the beavers are going to build themselves. Something that, potentially survives those big precipitation events, so that the next generation of beavers doesn't need quite as much material because they've got, a little bit of structure in place waiting for them when they, recolonize that reach. So, just spitballing, but, I always sort of like err on the side of trying to help the beavers rather than trying to, prevent them from doing what they are naturally inclined to do, because that just seems like a losing battle.
Yeah. Well, I love that idea. So that's pretty much all the questions I have. That's all the questions I'm seeing in the chat. So I think with that, we'll wrap things up. I want to encourage folks to go out and check out the book, Eager. And also, while you're at it, check out Crossings. And again, this presentation is going to be on our website in a couple days, northbranchnaturecenter.org/presentations. A big thanks again to all of our sponsors that made this possible: Hunger Mountain Co-op, 802 Coffee, all the other great folks around town that make this possible. Join us for our upcoming programs. Ben, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your work with us.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. Thanks, Naomi, for inviting me, and thanks to all of the attendees as well for jumping on. I appreciate it.
All right. Have a good night, everybody. Take care.